Just redo it.
So people on headsets, you have to relay.
I don't have a headset.
You have a headset, you have a headset. So relay whatever he doesn't hear. Go for it, and we're rolling upstairs. Action.
Okay. We're rolling. We're good?
I'm changing.
Yeah, I'm changing. I start off. Okay.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. My name is Justin Bell, and
Ivana Acosta.
And we are talking about environmental issues, and we're talking about how our youth and our generation can change these environmental issues.
Today we have Kenna. Kenna, you're a mother, a hospice nurse, you've been a midwife nurse, a published writer, and an environmentalist. How do all these titles contribute to the message you're trying to deliver to the world?
Well, I think that all of my various roles in life have mostly, in the past 10 years, come underneath the umbrella of mother and my motherhood. And moving forward in my life with being responsible for these small people who either are going to have a world that somewhat resembles the world that I was raised in, that I know how to navigate, or are going to be adrift in a world that I don't know how to prepare them for. Mm-hmm. That's such a huge imperative when you have taken on the responsibility of bringing forward another generation, and your job is to prepare them to succeed in the world. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what the world is going to look like for them, preparing them to succeed in an unknown world is this kind of crazy-making, neurosis-inducing problem. So a lot of what I've done since having children and realizing that, you know, my particular historical place in time is that I'm bringing a generation into a world that we don't know what it's going to look like. And so one of the imperatives of my mothering isn't just feed my children, educate my children, make sure they're happy and healthy. Mm-hmm. It's do what I can to preserve a world that's recognizable to us, that our skill sets have relevance in. So a world where there's massive famine and mass migrations of human populations in order to get to the areas where food production can still happen. Those kind of things, I mean, they sound kind of apocalyptic and scary and, you know, like that couldn't really happen, but it's happening. It's happening already. And if we look at the droughts and the fires and the extreme weather events, and there's a lot of denial that kicks in. And of course, that happens to me on a daily basis. I'm like, that's not happening. That couldn't happen because that's just way too scary and I can't handle it. Mm-hmm. And denial is an effective coping mechanism up to a point. But if we just hide in that all the time, you know, we can hide in our denial because otherwise we can't function in the world and we're just going to lie under the covers all day, you know, going, oh, I can't deal. So,
that's interesting that you say that because I feel like everybody does kind of get stuck in their own world, especially nowadays with the cell phones and the different things. Like yes. We get so in tune in our own world and we don't think about the bigger picture. And also, I think it's interesting that how you said you feel responsible, like for like the preparing your children, because I think in a lot of like history, it's shown that, oh, well, that's the next person's problem. Like, we'll deal with that, or they'll have to deal with that later, or I'm not dealing with it, like, right now in the present, so it doesn't, I'm in denial. Like, I don't see it, so it's really not happening. But you're actually taking it upon yourself to prepare the next generation, which is closer to our generation, and trying to make sure that your children know are educated and trying to preserve this world, at least preserve it is to your ability to at least something, I don't know how to say it, but something more natural or something that we're used to. We don't want it to get too far off. I mean, we've seen the transitions. We are talking to Gary about how the seasons are kind of shifting, and how there are droughts and all these different changes that we're not used to are happening so fast. And you're trying to actually, that's great that you're trying to not put it on the next generation's shoulders, but actually help the next generation and education and things.
That kind of passing on of the torch prematurely seems to be one of the great themes of our culture's dealing with the issue of climate change, is that we're like, oh, you people, you're so good at recycling, your generation, we know you're going to figure it out. And really, you guys are at a stage where you have an amazing amount of power, but it's not your responsibility yet. I mean, it's your responsibility on some level to use the power that you have, but for us as the older generations to be like, okay, you guys are going to figure it out, you guys are going to solve it, you youth, you have such great ideas, good luck. It's just not morally acceptable. It's as if the people living in Hitler's time said, oh, the next generation will figure this out. I'm sure that next generation will get rid of the concentration camps. I mean, to me, there's similar moral issues at stake. Are we going to collude with powerful interests that are harming humans, or are we going to stand up and say no to it? And we can't just say that's your job. You guys as youth and the youth vote, I'm sure you were highly targeted in our recent elections, but you see how powerful you are in terms of creating social change with the issue of gay marriage. Your generation coming into voting age has made a huge difference in terms of getting Obama elected instead of Mitt Romney, who, had he been elected, our whole fight about the Keystone Pipeline would be a moot point at this. We'd be lying our bodies down in front of bulldozers instead of chaining ourselves to the White House steps. And personally, I'd much rather get arrested at the White House than chain myself to a bulldozer. So, just the stakes are different, and you guys have that political place where I think you are going to make a huge difference, but it can't be all on you. We all generations have to sign on. And that was one of the powerful things that I experienced when I went to Washington a couple of years ago to take part in the arrests that were part of the original push against the Keystone Pipeline from 350.org, where days and days of people getting arrested at the White House. And major climate scientists and religious leaders from all over the country and all over the world. And it was amazing how many deep thinkers were arrested. And thank goodness for Daryl Hannah with her long blonde hair and her beautiful long legs, who actually is this person who knows how to use her celebrity to make change in the world. And so she showed up on the day that I was arrested. I was arrested with a movie star. And suddenly there were cameras everywhere, all these really important people had been arrested, but Daryl Hannah got arrested and there's cameras everywhere. and it seemed to make a difference to get that media exposure. And that action did seem to delay the decision somewhat, and it's given us a lot more opportunity to gather information and make a case and build a movement. But that action was so powerful because there were so many people there with gray hair. Really? And there was this little man with World War I veteran handle with care. Oh, wow. That's cool. And so there was. It's just us saying, this is a moral issue, and not laying it onto you guys' laps.
That's great.
Well, now we're going to take some questions from our audience. You guys feel free to ask anything.
What are some specific things we can do to preserve the environment and not let it, get exponentially worse?
Right. So my personal journey towards kind of figuring out, what can I do? Because that's the question. What can I do? And what can I do? There's all these things I feel like I should be doing that I don't seem to be able to achieve. So it has to be in this realistic, what can I do question, and all the pieces of that have to work. So mine started with like hanging my laundry out instead of burning fossil fuels to dry my clothes. But what that did was give me a grounding of like, oh, look at this thing. I've integrated this thing that everybody thinks, oh, that's too much trouble, I couldn't possibly do that, into my life, and it works. And that gave me kind of the grounding. It's also this very meditative activity, like each thing on the clothesline. So that gave me the ground to feel like, okay, well, I did something. Like, it's not really a very big deal in the big picture, but I did one thing. And that gave me the power to move on in my own brain of, well, what else can I do? Well, I can, remember my bags when I go to the grocery store and all that stuff, like that. Even if you add up all my individual actions, like, it's not going to make a difference in climate change. But what it does is it makes a difference in my own consciousness, and it makes a difference in the consciousnesses of the people around me. Like, my friends tease me. They're like, oh, here comes Kenna, hide your single-use bags, or like, oh, put your to-go cup under the table, or whatever it is. But what that does is it raises our consciousness level around the issues. And what that does is create a community of people who are more likely to exert their political will, who are more likely to write to their legislators. And really that's the level on which things need to be happening, is creating a sense in Washington and all governments, not that we're all necessarily American citizens here, but that the governments understand that this is an important issue for people, and that we will vote according to this issue, and that they will be in or out of power depending on what positions they take on this issue.
Very good. Very good question. Anything else?
So you're mentioning politics a lot and how we can make a difference. Do you think that would be, like, probably the biggest influence we could have would be, like, our influence on politics instead of our individual acts?
Kind of, and if I tried to answer that question objectively, if there was a right or wrong answer to that question, I would say yes, political action is probably the most effective. But I don't think that's necessarily true on an individual level. Like, you may not be good at politics. Like, I personally get completely anxiety ridden if I try to make calls to my senator. Like, I get, my heart starts beating, I get all sweaty. Like, talking to strangers on the phone is not it's just not one of my strengths. So I think, well, maybe my time is actually better put to use in writing essays that get disseminated to different mothering publications where, broad groups of mothers read these and think about their green actions and, their political power or whatever it is. So it is not necessarily that there's this kind of like getting involved in politics is the right thing for you, because only you can decide what your particular strengths are and where your passion is. And if you try to apply your energies to something that doesn't resonate within your passions, you're going to burn out and you're going to become ineffective at doing whatever it is you're trying to do. So I think you have to find your strengths and find out how those can contribute.
At the point we have to end. Can you wrap this up?
So those are some great answers, and thank you. Those are some great questions, and I think we definitely hit a lot of key points today. Definitely have answered a lot of questions that the youth had, and we kind of see where the issue, this environmental issue, is really coming from. Like CO2 emissions and all these bad things. So how do we go from here, and how do we change these things? We have to start at an individual base. And as we work from an individual base, we can start hopefully gearing and shaping the community around us. And then hopefully we can get that to go to the political level where things can start changing in our government. So.
Great.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank
We
you guys
appreciate
so
it.
much for
Very
having me.
inspirational.